press record. And since we're almost at time, I'm going to go ahead and send this over. So y'all just give me a minute. Goodness.
All right, here we are live with the Jive.
Hey, Chief Benet, give me 1 second. Sorry.
Oh, man.
No.
Good start there.
All right, Chief Benet.
All right, here we are live with the Jive once again. This was an episode that I've been looking forward to, extremely excited about. This is one that we put out to all the membership. So we are in uncharted territories, and we're going to see how it rolls. Tonight, I'm joined by Amanda Moore and Sabrina Yao, and as always, I'm with Chief Kip from Columbia Fire Department. I guess this one, since we're doing it to everybody, I need to introduce myself. I'm Will Vaigneur. They let me, I have to pay, but they let me host a Jive. I work with Ladies on the Fire Department, Past President Association. This is something that Chief Kip got me into. We started this with Officer Academy, and we had a roundtable, and we started just talking. Me and him had a great time together. We really hit it off, became good friends. And they said, "Hey, man, y'all want to do this every month?" And we said, "Yeah, let's do it." So that's me, and I'm gonna turn it over to Chief Kip so he can introduce himself, and then we'll get to Amanda and Sabrina.
Yeah, thanks. So Chris Kip, I've been with the Columbia Fire Department for 26 years now. And like Will said, this is kind of the spun off from an idea of when we were just sitting around talking one night at the firehouse. And it's kind of what the nature of these conversations is, the same kind of thing that's happening around firehouse tables in every firehouse in the country. So Amanda and Sabrina, we sure appreciate you sitting here with us.
Oh, thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Yes.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, so this is going to be probably a little different than what we normally do. It's a lot of leadership, it's a lot of tactics and things like that. But we really want to give the membership more. We want to provide more, and both of y'all have some very interesting programs that y'all teach all around. Now we're going to have an episode that focuses on family and how we pull that off. Both of you will be teaching at our conference, so this is kind of the precursor to that. So Sabrina, can I start with you and you introduce yourself and kind of tell your background and how you got into this?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Sabrina Yaw. I've been married about 30 years. We've been together about 33 years. My husband is a major with Oklahoma City Fire. He's been there about 24 years, was a police medic prior to getting on with the fire department. So he's almost always been first responder since we've been together. We have two incredible daughters. They're 27, 29, and a great son-in-law. I have a background in, my husband says I changed careers about every decade. I was a clinician for a while. I did a nonprofit doing international work in Africa for a while. And then now I'm an operations officer for a software company. So this has been something, it's one of those conversations that I think is always takes place, but maybe always in the background with people. Amanda and I met only 3 years ago at a Fool's meeting and sat in a back corner with a couple of other wives and started talking about things we wish we would have known 25 years ago when our husbands first started in the first responder world. And from there, it decided, well, if we're going to affect change and things are going to happen, somebody's got to do it. So let's just do it. And it has kind of grown from there. We've now been able to start a spouse peer support program with Oklahoma City Fire that Amanda and I are both a part of, and have been able to kind of share our experiences through that and our experiences of just being married to first responders and what that's like. So.
Now, Sabrina, you said that you have one great son-in-law, so I'm hoping that only one of your daughters is married.
Well, that's correct for now, yes.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, I was hoping there wasn't some poor son-in-law I did. Dang. So Amanda, if you could tell us your backstory.
Yes, sorry, I was unmuting. So yeah, my name is Amanda Moore. My husband and I have been married 27 years. He's been on the department for 26. We have 3 beautiful children. All of our children have a servant's heart. They're grown. We have 2 daughters One's a nurse, one's a school teacher, two son-in-laws, and our son just finished his first year on Oklahoma City Fire Department. So he's second generation firefighter. So Corley and I are incredibly proud and blessed to have them. But I help my husband run Firehouse Vigilance and the Weekly Scrap. I am also a business owner. And so we just have busy lives, just like everybody else. But like Sabrina said, we met at a Fools Conference a few years ago. And it was one of those things where as wives, we tend to maybe shy away from. I know I did for quite a while. It took me quite a long time to agree to go to one. And I'm glad I did, because I was able to make connections with other wives.
Awesome. So anybody listening tonight, if your spouse is in the other room or doing something else, bring her in for the listen. Because this information, I think, is critical to make it in the fire service. And it's something that we as firefighters overlook. We overlook the importance of it, or we kind of get focused on what we got going on to be the best we can be on duty. And we forget sometimes to be the best off duty and how that works. And I think both y'all's program kind of outline or give advice and talk about how both sides can work together to be the best. And both of y'all teach different programs, but somehow they meld together. So Sabrina, I believe your program is preventing the flashover, and Amanda, your program is back to the table, which are two different subjects, but are hitting the same point. So Sabrina, if you could tell me a little bit about what you offer in your program and kind of what that means, preventing the flashover.
Yeah, so I always feel like if we can speak the same language with our spouses, then we kind of direct a little bit more attention, and it kind of perks their ears up a little bit. So when we started talking about relationships and that marital relationship and what that looks like with a first responder, I thought it would be a great idea to kind of tie in some of those elements within, so the spouses can go back and talk to their firefighter and say, hey, so we talked about a flashover, or we talked about VES, or we talked about, the impact of closing the door and opening it too fast. And that's kind of how this is geared towards us in our relationship. We have a lot of different things just naturally that cause things to ignite and adds fuel to the fire. And then as a first responder, we have additional things that go into that, between schedule conflicts, between just the shift work itself and overtime, and sometimes even just the calls and the trauma and things like that go along with it. And so we talk about in my class about what are those things that you look for, and then how do you prevent that flashover from occurring? How do you kind of put that water on the fire and know when timing is right to do that, and how to learn to communicate with each other so that maybe the firefighter doesn't want to share with their spouse what they saw because they want to protect them. And but then at the same time, they come home and say everything was fine, and then we deal with that other end of it. And Melinda O's does a great job in her book of talking about work brain and home brain, and what happens when first responders have that work brain and they're just constantly going. And then when they're done with that shift, everything starts to come down. Well, that coming down brings them back home. And so then we as spouses are dealing with that transition from work to home brain. And so we kind of talk about what that looks like, because if you can't identify the problem, you can't fix it, or you can't work with it. And so we use different ways to learn how to communicate. Some people, like I said, some people want to know details, some don't. I've learned just most recently, oddly enough, that I don't necessarily need to know details, which I always thought I did. What I need to know is that mentally and emotionally, my husband's okay. And so sometimes that code word is just, hey, do you need this or do you need this? And that lets me know where he's at mentally and emotionally, so we can work from there. And then we just kind of talk about different ways, fun ways to learn to recommunicate, and that our relationships there's never an end point in our marriage or in our first responder world, because you have the first getting on with the department, you have the shift work, you have the promotional exams. We just recently went through that, and I felt like, yeah, we learned this stuff a while back, but now we're starting back over again to relearn some of the things that we thought we had down pat, but just life and circumstances get in the way.
Now, Sabrina, how long did it take you to learn this? And as your husband's going through the fire service, how long did that take for y'all to reach that point where y'all were, really communicating? And
I think because of, I laugh, if I hadn't been a clinician early on, I think things would have been a lot different for us, because I felt like I had learned some of those techniques and just ways to set ground rules for each other. This is what's okay with me and this is okay with you, and as long as we can meet that together. So early on we had some, but then kids came into the world, completely changed it. And that's what I mean. You think you have it, and then kids come into the world, the kids grow up, they age, we're empty nesters now. And then we've been through the whole promotional cycle as well. So we're always learning and trying to figure it out. That's what, the first time, last summer, my husband was studying for a chief's exam, and it was a very long process. And at the end of the day, about a week later, I actually called him on shift, and I rarely do. I called him on shift and I just said, I need you to come home. We need to just kind of and we've been together 33 years. I said, I just need you to come home. And it was the first time in 24 years that he called his chief and said, I need to go home. She needs me. And if she says she needs me, I need to go. But that was another point in our relationship of, okay, we've been through all of these things. Now let's just make sure we're resetting on the same page. Because from this point forward, I'll carry the weight at home or whatever I need to while you're studying, I'll support you. But then that transition back into that is difficult sometimes. And it just needs to make sure that, you stay on the same page with it.
Well, you hit on something good there that, in my life, I'll probably at max have things figured out for 3 months. And then something changes and then something's new. Now I'm relearning, and whether it's changing at home, whether it's changing at the firehouse, but, it's like 3 months and then, okay, now something new. Now, man, if you can talk about your program, and then we're going to tie it all together, and then we'll work from there as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I designed this program. Corley and I come from two opposite backgrounds, our family dynamics. And so we had the ability early on to recognize what we wanted to capture from each side. And one of the common denominators that we both said was important to us was the dinner table. My husband's family is very big on dinner table conversations, and my family was not. And so that was one of the things that we said going into, we were kids having kids, fresh out of high school when we had our first one. And I talk about that a little bit in my class. We set when we first got married, we were set up for success. And I say that jokingly because we had the odds stacked against us, and to be really honest. But we were wise enough, even at that age, to know that the table is where we really needed to be. And through all the highs and lows, the common denominator that we both had was that kitchen table. And so we spent a lot of time. I mean, our kids were raised around the dinner table, and a lot of, good conversations came from that, but also a lot of uneasy conversations came from that. And we just navigated those waters. So in the class that I teach, Back to the Table, a mindset for fostering healthy relationships, that's really what it is. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it means to go back to the table, especially in today's day and age where there's so much busyness to be had, kids in sports or, working 2-3 jobs and cell phones and just social media in general, and just all the things that take their time thieves. And it's so hard to make the table a priority. And traveling to conferences with my husband, I get to talk to so many amazing couples who, and I ask them, it's not a judgment factor of, who takes time, who makes it a priority to sit at the table and have these conversations. And it's shocking. I mean, it's not a shock. I mean, obvious, it's there. It's lacking. The dinner table conversations are lacking, but yet our firefighters make it a priority to, if you ask them one of their favorite things at the firehouse, it's sitting around the dinner table. And they have phenomenal conversations around that, and they figure out life around that dinner table. And so why should it be any different for the home life? And it comes down to prioritizing busy schedules, which is often very, very difficult to do. So we're going to navigate those waters. My family has 3 core principles that, again, early on, by the grace of God, I don't know, we were wise enough to land on 3 core principles. And that's really how we raised our family. when you peel back the layers, it's communication, inspiration, and dedication. And I deep dive into those. And it's a fast-paced class, got a lot of information in it. And but we break those apart and see what that's all about. And I'm excited. I'm very excited to be there and be able to share it.
Hey, Amanda, every household has certain, different styles, different cultures. But what are some of the different rules for the dinner table that you've thought about or talked about?
Yeah, well, when Corley and I first were having kids, cell phones were really not, that was 26 years ago. And so cell phones, I mean, they were, but we couldn't afford one. So we didn't have to approach that issue. But TV's always off, cell phones down, away. I don't want it buzzing at the table. It breaks concentration. Even now, if I'm talking to somebody face to face, I won't answer my cell phone. It's kind of sad. My house will be burning, and I just won't look at my cell phone because I want them to know that what they have to say is important. And same thing goes with the dinner table. If whoever's at my house, come dinner time, we're sitting at the table and we're going to have these conversations. And like I said, TV goes off. Minimize those distractions as much as possible. And the reality is people eat fast. Dinner doesn't have to be an hour, 2 hours long. If we can dedicate 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and it doesn't have to be a grandiose, 5-course meal either. Mac and cheese and hot dogs, and 5 minutes on the stove and 10 minutes on the table. A lot can be said in those 10 minutes. But what you find is you don't want to get up from the dinner table oftentimes during those conversations because they start getting deep and you start learning along.
Well, probably should I study this up beforehand because I knew who I was talking with. And what is, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. What is the divorce rate in emergency service? Just a close guess. Or
we were actually talking about that today, and one of the spouses thinks it's a lot lower than what it used to be. Somebody said, I think we're in the lower than 10%, which I think we used to be in the top 5, but it's in the top 5% for careers you don't want to marry into. And I think just because of the to me, it's just my interpretation of that, but just the uniqueness of this world, because it truly is its own lifestyle for everybody, for the family and for the first responder. So I think we're getting better. And I think because we're actually acknowledging some mental health stuff as well, I think that's creating healthier families and better resources that are available for people.
Yeah, in next room, and she's watching this as we're doing it. So I don't mind saying this out in front of everybody, but I can't tell you the number of classes I've taken on leadership and and relationships and how many books I've read, and I've read 0 on relationships in the home. It's just not something that we push. It's not. It's okay. You need to learn all about your people and how to motivate, how to lead, but there's nothing ever been pushed to me to say, hey, you need to learn this at home.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think
it out.
I'm sorry. I think one of the things in that is I was talking to a group not too long ago, and we were talking about how to communicate with your first responder. And what I thought about in that process was when the tones drop, you all have your tones drop, your lights kick, your computer printer starts going off. You've got your computer in the cab of the rig. You're constantly on the radio. You've got dispatch in your ear telling you and updating you constantly. But when we communicate with each other in our relationships, it's one time and we expect each other to get it. So the fire service has something figured out, right, that they know that we got to just keep telling them over and over and over the same information so that something, so that it gets through and that they do what they need to do and they have the right tools to do that. But we don't necessarily take that time in our relationships to do that.
Yeah. And that was when we were discussing that this morning, and they said, it was like in the top whatever of careers not to marry into. I'm looking at, Corley and I have a 22-year-old son, and he's not married. And I just think, golly, we're doing such a disservice to our firefighters by putting that type of, it needs to change. And I don't know if we need to, obviously we need educate ourselves and to get better at learning how to communicate and like what you were saying, seek out those avenues to better help our relationships. But we also need to let the public know that it's not as, I don't know where they're getting that. I mean, I'm not saying that the statistic is wrong. I just, we need to change that mindset for the public. That's not a good of you to have. So Courtney and I early on, very, very early on, about the 10-year mark, we were searching and trying to find, different books and things like that would help us, out. And the book, it's always thrown out there, but it's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or yeah, I think that's, and it's kind of when it's been around forever, but we picked up that book and we both read it, and it was just like kind of like, oh, we already knew that about each other, but there was something about having that book and having that information to kind of just, I don't know, reel it in and say, okay, well, yeah, we're different. We have these different battles, but together, we can make it work.
Well, and I think marriage is hard no matter what in the first 5 years. I don't care what profession you're in, what you're doing, figuring somebody else out and living with them in the first 5 years is tough. Now, to put something in there when you're talking scheduling and dedication and commitment into a career like firefighting or EMS or police or whatever, just is to add more to it. I think you hear a lot of things of why people get divorced. It's financial reasons and it's this, that. But I would always say that the number one reason is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take any NIOSH report, line of duty, the number one reason is always going to be in the top, communication.
Mm-hmm.
So we're willing to listen to any story you're willing to tell us about the fire ground and how important communication is, but we don't necessarily bring it home.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, and we just need to do a better job teaching that. And I think that's why y'all are invited and why you're on here now, is so we can kind of bring, I guess, some awareness to it, that everybody has this, and here's some remedies, here's some ways to kind of work through it, because your problem's not unique.
Yeah.
Everybody.
Well, and at the end of the day, if we can create that family dynamic that we talk about in the fire service, and that we can foster not just the firefighter or your brothers and sisters, but we foster the spouses and the family as a whole, then we make better home lives. And when we make better home lives, our firefighters are better firefighters because they're not worried and focused about what's happening at home. They can focus on their job at hand and do what they're called to do. And so to be able to have these opportunities out there to be able to share this information is just, I feel so incredibly blessed to be a part of this, to just try to help other firefighters and learn, and spouses, and to learn from them too, because we don't have all of the answers. I just know what we've been through, or what my husband and I have been through, and the struggles that we've had.
Well, and that's the thing, and I share that, communication is the hardest thing, but it's also the easiest thing. I mean, and it doesn't have to be pretty, there's oftentimes I word vomit what I'm trying to say and preface it with, this may not come out how I need for it to, but I need to say what I need to say, and then we can break it down from there. And 27 years, obviously we've matured in our relationship, and we got to that point. The me, 5 years into the marriage probably couldn't do that, And so, but if we can provide these tools to the firefighters and their spouses that are willing to listen and willing to absorb the information, and if it just helps even just one, it's completely worth it. And it goes beyond relationships with your spouse. It's your children too. If you have children, or even in-laws, extended family, like what the message that I bring back to the table, it encompasses any relationship that you want to have or that you want to foster.
Well, it's interesting, just hearing you all speak, because you have this perspective of 27 years and 33 years of marriage. And one thing that does is give others hope, because like we've been saying, the first 5 years, 10 years, we're learning so much and learning how to communicate, and in that learning, failing a lot. But I really appreciate you all and admire you all for sharing your story, because that gives a lot of hope.
Yeah, and the waters, obviously, they haven't been easy to navigate, and like I said, Corley and I have the odds stacked against us, and I think pretty much any couple that gets married, they do. I mean, you have to start, you go from not, having this partner that you're with, 20, I mean, maybe I guess if you live together, but that you're not with 24/7, or maybe that you don't have to answer to or share finances with or whatever, into now we're one, and you got to figure out how to navigate those waters as you go through life. So, I mean, that right there is already, difficulties that you have to figure out. But, with Corley and I, it was one of those where people were literally betting against us. And to look back and say 27 years later, and to see where we've come from, I know we're not alone. And to be able to touch those couples that feel like that the end is inevitable, and the only way out is to end it. It doesn't have to be that way.
Well, and I can sympathize with you, because they said the same thing about me and my wife. And a lot of times when things got tough, that was my motivation. Y'all said we couldn't do it. So every anniversary, I look at those people that said that and like, still standing.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, so in y'all's programs, what is the age group that y'all are seeing? Are y'all seeing all the spectrum, or is it people that have been married a little longer? Do you have a lot of young wives or husbands in there?
We really have a mix. You have some of the older support, but I say older, I can say that because I'm older, but you have some of the older support. And I think some of that's just through our own connections and just relationships that we've developed, especially Amanda and Corley across the country. So you have that older, seasoned firefighter spouse that's in there. And one of the things that we've heard from them is the same as the reason why we did it is I wish I would have known. It would have saved us so much. We did start a few years, or I guess about a year ago, with our recruit classes with Oklahoma City. We were fortunate enough to get in and do family academies once a month. Throughout their 4-month academy, we set up opportunities for the spouses to come in the evening for a couple of hours. We would do one night on relationships, marriage, what it's like to be in a relationship with a first responder. Amanda and another wife do raising your children in the fire service. We have another spouse that does finding your tribe, finding those people, because you have to have your relationships in and out of the department, but you also have to have relationships with those spouses that you can call and go, you know what, today was really a crappy day. My husband's gone or not gone. He's home, and it's a crappy day because he came home carrying all this baggage from work or whatever it is. But somebody that you don't have to share details with, and they just know, they just understand the dynamic of the relationship. And then we also have a track on basically a financial peace kind of track that's given to the recruits during the academy. But then the same person that does that gives it to the spouses and the family members that show up at family night. So everybody's on the same page about, what retirement can look like, and insurance and all of the things that we want you to bring home to us, but doesn't necessarily make it. So long answer to your question, we're really seeing it across the board now. And I love the fact that we have the older seasoned firefighters, because I really feel like there's a desire to affect change for the younger generations. Because I think, like what you guys are saying, you're seeing what you've been through. But if you can affect that and let your younger firefighters know that, hey, these are things, your family life is important too. The job is great and you love the job. My husband says he's never worked a day in his life. He absolutely loves it. But it's important to devote, like you said, to devote that same attention that you do to the job, to your home. Because when you're retired, you're retired, but hopefully your spouse is still there, and you don't want to start retirement trying to start back over. You just want to carry on through retirement. So
no, you already have to do that when the kids move away. Figure out if you still know each other, still like each other. I don't know. Now, Chief Kip, do y'all have anything like that at Columbia?
That kind of support group?
Yes.
We don't, but Sabrina, when you're talking about, during the recruit school, how you had the monthly, is it monthly or weekly?
We do it once a month while they're in academy. And it's a 4-month academy.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea for so many reasons. But one that you spoke of that really spoke to me is finding a tribe. Mm-hmm. Because, a lot of times, like our recruit classes, we have 20, 25 people. And sometimes they're coming from New Jersey, all kinds of places. And regardless of that, even if it's a small department, when a recruit class comes together, as families coming who don't know each other,
Mhm.
incredibly important to develop those support those support networks.
Well, and I think to be able to tell, especially the new ones coming in, that all of what they're going to see, experience, and think is normal, and to understand that you may be really close with your family, but if we're first gen fire family, and there's a lot of family that still, after all these years, don't realize that he's gone 24 hours when he goes to work, or that why can't he just come to Christmas, or so to be able to help younger families or new families into the service navigate even those types of things, that you may have all this great family support on the day to day, but they don't understand this world. And so just to be able to be there to say, this is normal. These are some things that we've tried, we do, and sometimes they just don't get it. I mean, just sad but true. Sometimes they just don't understand the dynamic because they've just not been a part of it.
Right.
And if I could, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Amanda.
I was going to piggyback on what Sabrina was saying. So when we bring the families of the recruit classes in, we share with them too what the recruit's going to experience, because it's important for them to know the stresses that their recruit's going to be under, and to give it a little bit of grace. We know life still happens, life goes on even through academy, but if at all possible, just understand they're going to be extra tired, they're going to be worn out, mentally exhausted, all these things. And then two, it sets them up for after graduation, when your firefighter goes on and he pulls, 24 hours, didn't sleep at all, and maybe got overtime too. And now he's coming home after 48 hours, completely exhausted. Hopefully, with the stresses of already being a first responder's spouse, that hopefully by knowing these things and preparing yourself and preparing your family, maybe you can kind of get ahead of that and have maybe a little bit more understanding, and also be able to communicate those things when things start going sideways.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. I'm just thinking about what y'all are saying. And when we have our recruit school, then when we have our recruit graduation, and we make a point during the graduation to recognize the families of the recruits, the spouse, and the parent. And when we do that, we say, now you're part of our family. But how much better would it be if during the whole process we started building those family bonds? I really admire what y'all are doing.
Well, and one of the things that we're fortunate with in helping us transition, my husband was a training center coordinator when we started transitioning with the peer team and being able to implement some of this. But the command staff was on board from day one. And so our first class that we had with the recruits, the command staff shows up and welcomes them then, and just and I think it's really important, because I know when my husband first got on the command staff, they weren't approachable, because you're a recruit and that's the command staff, and so they're just not approachable. But I love the fact that the command staff is a part of this, because then it shows them that they're just people. They just happen to wear a different colored shirt. That's it. But they truly do care about the family. So we do, we took a lot of the ideas from our police department. Oklahoma City Police Department has been doing this for a while, but one of the things that they shared with us is that they set up group me's, which we started doing that with our recruit families. So each recruit family has their own group me from the first time they show up at that class. And so there's constant communication through there about what's happening, or sometimes they said they were supposed to buy a shirt, but we don't know where to go. So sometimes it's just, sometimes it's little stuff. But what we're seeing is they're staying in touch with each other. And hey, we're going to go, there's a group of us that are going to go to dinner. Who wants to go? So it's like what you said, Chief, of that, just fostering those relationships early. So even though when they go out and they're doing their probationary period and they're making their circuit with the stations, they already have connections with somebody before that permanent assignment hits.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because Chief, I'm guessing I'm a lot like you. When she was talking about it, I was like, man, that's a great idea. Why are we not doing it? In my area, we have a lot of hurricanes that requires evacuations. Well, firefighters stay back, families got to evacuate, So if we had that network built and a whole lot better, then the seasoned spouses could kind of take care of the ones that's been there for 1 or 2 years. It maybe moved in from Oklahoma and never, maybe set to 3 tornadoes, but never a hurricane. So so there's a lot that you may need to learn, and if they could help them navigate those waters, that would be a whole lot comforting, a whole lot more comforting to the firefighter who's now stuck on duty for 72, 96 hours waiting for the storm to go through and clean up.
Yeah.
Well,
And for us spouses, I know for me and traveling and getting to talk to a lot of spouses, they share similar feelings of you as a spouse, especially a first generation or a new spouse, you feel isolated a lot of times. You feel alone. You feel like your hurricane situation, am I supposed to evacuate all this by myself? Like I what do I do now? And so, and like our wives who have gone through, tornadoes after the first, it's like, haven't seen my husband in a week, and it's like, well, as long as the chaplain's not showing up at your door, you're good, and luckily now we have cell phones, so we can have that kind of communication pretty quickly, pretty early on. But before that, it was, well, he didn't show up for a week and neither did the chaplain, so we're good. But how awesome would it have been to be able to have a spouse to have, to seek comfort in? And that's what we're hoping to do here.
Another thing that comes to mind is in our department, and I think a lot of departments, the first couple of days of recruit school is orientation, and that's where they learn about insurance and benefits and all that stuff, and they probably retain 0% of that information, right? So I'm imagining, how beneficial it is to have these networks, especially with spouses of the current firefighters, who can come in and say, okay, now there's this thing called medical flex spending, and your firefighter probably will not come home and tell you about it, but you need to know about it. That kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much, we laugh and joke about it now, but this 457 thing and all, I mean, it is all Greek because it's not the norm for a lot of people. And so to be able to just at least let the spouses or family members in on that from the beginning so that they can learn as they go. And, when things come up, even the little things like, well, in addition to that, I guess, employee assistance program, it was years before I knew that applied to family, because it just isn't, they get an email about it and it goes in the trash because they read it and they think, well, I'll tell them later. And then later doesn't happen because life happens. And so this provides us that opportunity just to catch them from the very beginning, to be able to say, hey, this is everything that's available to you, your resources and all that you need. And here's our information. If you have a question, call us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
I'll say there was nobody there to navigate for my wife. And I don't know what I make. I still don't know what I make. I don't know what bills we pay. I don't know any of that. She handles all of it. But, there was nobody. She just, I'd bring paperwork home. She'd read it, figure it out, and then she would deal with it.
Yeah,
And
that's
such a good guy. I still don't know.
Hey,
Smart wife right there. I'm just kidding.
you said in the beginning, your intro was talking about the work brain and the home brain. I think it was the family brain. And that really struck me because I think it's important for firefighters to understand that they are thinking in a certain way at work, and that when they cross the threshold back into home, things change. And it's important, and obviously important for the spouse too. And it reminds me of, I became a father when I was a young officer. And as my children were growing up, I would become very frustrated when I'd ask, I'd tell them to do something, and I get all this flim flam. And it took me some time to realize why I was getting so frustrated is because, at work, when I ask the guys to do something, they do it. Why am I? So that's, in my mind, that's just one example of where understanding that differentiation is very valuable.
Well, and it allows you the opportunity, at least as a wife, to provide some grace. It used to drive me crazy. My husband would come home and I would have, the mail stacked in one spot on the counter, and he would walk in first thing, look over and spread it all out. I'm like, there's nothing in there for you, or maybe there was, but why does it all need to get, just filter through it and then take what you need. Don't spread it over the entire counter. And then talking to wives and reading Menda O's book on Work Brain, Home Brain, that was part of it, is at work, everything that you guys do has to have its place, because you have to know where it is so that you can access it when you need it. If it's not there, then lives are at risk. And so sometimes that element carries over at home, where they just need to be able to see things and know where everything is, and everything needs to have its place as that transition happens. Because if he's on his 4-day, we just laugh at it. I just leave it. But when he does his 4 days off, usually by day 2, I could put it back together and it's fine and it goes away. But for a while, it was frustrating, because he kept, and I would be like, seriously, the house is clean, or is it not good enough for you that you got to go spread it out all over the counter? But in understanding that dynamic of what happens to them and to their brain and the emotions while they're at work versus that transition home, and the guilt of knowing they're coming home and needing and knowing they want to be there for their family or for their kids, but they're still thinking about that call, or that one thing that went wrong, or that one thing that went right, or whatever that is. And that guilt that sometimes is associated with that too, because they want to be at home and they want to be involved and a part of it. But getting that turned off so that they can be is sometimes a hard process.
Yeah. So one of the things that I try to remind my guys of all the time, the public reminds us how important we are. And since 9/11, everybody's thanking you way more, and just and they use the term hero and all those things. And sometimes we forget, while we're out being a hero, everything that's going on at home. Who's helping with homework? Who's taking them to ball practice? Who's taking them to dance? Who's doing all those things that when we're on duty for 48 hours, who's doing those things? And then, so you got to remember that when you come home, that all those things were getting done. You got to appreciate that, because the spouse of a firefighter or any emergency service is as noble as fighting a fire as anything, just to make sure that's facilitated and these kids are all right.
Well, I think sometimes there can be that comparison of which is more important. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that, is that you get that from the job and what you guys do. And obviously, and Amanda and I are incredibly proud to be married to firefighters, because this is such a huge thing for us, and absolutely love being a part of this life. But there is that dynamic of, and I think that's part of just figuring out the whole family and the communication of, you have a persona at work of, you're a hero, you're a firefighter, and thank you for what you do. And you have the conversation with your spouse, and they're on their way home, or they get home and they're like, I'm tired, I'm gonna lay down and take a nap because we didn't sleep at all last night. And the wife is sitting there going, I got 2 babies that screamed all night. I didn't either. So yours isn't more important. Neither one of us slept. So, understanding those types of things too. I love what you said, is that sometimes, because things keep moving forward, but you're at work and you don't realize, or maybe forget, that life continues on and the spouses continue to kind of keep the home front going.
Absolutely.
While you're there. So,
Well, and I think too, it's a partnership. And so, it's not done on either side out of maliciousness. Neither partner comes home and is short with one another, or is comparing, tasks to one another to be malicious. I want to believe that we want the best for each other, and we tend to take it out on the one we love the most. We expect them to understand us more, or just to get it, or just to deal with it. And so that's where that partnership, but it goes right back to the communication that we talked about earlier. It's difficult to do, but it's also easy to do.
But Amanda, so communication is a struggle for me. And to have you say it's also, it's difficult, but it's also easy, is like really encouraging to hear. But what are some of the tools you share?
Yeah. So it first comes down to listen. Oftentimes we want to be heard, both people, and I think even just in conversating with a group of people, if you just kind of sit back and you listen, people like to talk, and they seem to like to talk about themselves. So I think just at the beginning, just listening. Is it, and sometimes it's just silence, and maybe it's awkward silence, one of the tips that I use is the ability to listen, which is more difficult than what a lot of people would actually think, because they want to input advice or they want to step in, they want to break that silence, but just sit back, listen. The other tip is to start off with I. When you start off saying you came home late, you didn't do the dishes, you didn't this. I learned that it took me a long time because I thought, well, I'm just telling you what the things that are that I don't like, or the things that you're doing that I wish you didn't do. But when I started turning around and saying and I'm not a therapist, but I have been to therapy, and so I can't recommend it enough. I've been to marriage counseling and personal. And so this is years worth of my therapist talking through me. But when you turn it around and you start saying I feel a little bit maybe neglected, or I feel a little bit like what I'm doing here at the house isn't as important as maybe what I think it is. When you start turning around and saying I feel this way, it takes it from you being accusatory to you acknowledging your own emotions and letting them know that it's okay, that hey, yeah, you might not be doing these things that I wish you did, dishes or insert whatever, but I feel this way. It's not necessarily because you're not doing it, it's just because I feel this way. It's a psychological thing, but it actually works. And so if you just listen and then start using I feel this way, are two big things that you can do that will change the dynamic of your communicating. And the other thing is to do away with the blame game. Oftentimes we, like Sabrina said earlier, we want to keep score. Well, I took the kids to ball practice, 7 times, and you've only taken them twice. And it's a partnership. And sometimes, we have to give 110 and maybe you give negative, but at the end of the day, you're going to give 110 and, I'm going to give negative sometimes. So hope that helps.
That's good.
Absolutely. So, Amanda, when you have those times of awkward silence, because I'll tell you, when I'm sitting there and not talking, that means my mind's going 100 miles an hour. So how do you have the patience to wait through that?
Anybody that knows my husband knows that his mind's going 24/7. So, oftentimes I used to take the blank stare as he is checked out, he's donezo, he's not even on the same playing field as I am. I used to take offense to that. But what we've learned through communicating and through years of being married together is he's processing. And I have to give him that ability to process, because if he handled me at home the way he handles, maybe his crew, maybe you can be a little bit more stern, like on the fire ground or whatever. And if he handled me that way at home, that's not going to go anywhere good. So he's processing how he's going to answer me back or communicate with me, so that way it's not that he doesn't want me to be offended by it. He wants to make sure that the words that he uses is appropriate for whatever it is that we're going to discuss.
And I think sometimes, just to tag on to what Amanda's saying too, is rules of engagement. There's nothing in the book that says that you can't sit down with your partner and say, okay, so this is how I feel when this happens. This is what I need. But so how can we do this in the future? We have it took us a while to figure it out. We have a wine and a tea. That's our general overall conversation of when he comes home from shift or I come home from work. If he's home, is it a wine day or a tea day? If it's a tea day, then it's game on, and I know that we're both in a good space, or that he's in a good space, and that I can engage and we can have conversation. If it's a wine day, I know I need to give him some space. Actually, that was started out with me. I needed the wine, so I should say a tea or beer day, but be a better fit. But if it's just those little subtle agreeances that you have on what that communication looks like for you and what works for you. For us, it took us a long time to figure that out, but now we know, all right, I need to give him a little bit more grace. And at the same time, we have agreements that if we're going to have a conversation that's maybe a difficult one for us to have, whether it's one of us is going to have to be more vulnerable than the other, we've just set ground rules. And you do it ahead of time, so when you're in the middle of it, you don't overreact or underreact, or you miss a cue or whatever it is. But we have from very beginning have an agreement that we'll never raise our voices to each other. That's not how I want to be treated. It's not how he wants to be treated. It's not how we feel like we should treat your partner, the person that you're spending your life with. And so we give each other permission to stop the conversation. And the other person can't argue with it because we've agreed on it ahead of time. So if I'm raising my voice, he has permission from me before we ever got into a discussion to stop me and take a timeout. We're going to take a 5-10 minute break, but we're going to agree to meet back in 10 minutes to finish the conversation. And so sometimes, and those are sometimes difficult conversations to have, but once they're set, it makes those situations, those awkward silences or anything like that, a little bit easier, because it's not a personal thing. It's like, we just want to work through this in a healthy way so that you're heard and I'm heard and nobody has to win. And I think that's a big thing for us too, is nobody has to win. It's like our 99.9% of the time, our disagreements end in, I feel like I heard you. I feel like you heard me. Can we just start over tomorrow or in an hour or whatever? And we just agree to disagree. And I think that's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We don't have to win an argument.
Well, and I think you're setting those expectations when you're at a healthy point in your relationship. So, when you're past, fussing or whatever, or disagreeing, when it's a great, clear day and everybody's getting along, to be able to just say, hey, can we take 10 minutes and sit down? Let's line out how we want to handle things moving forward. When I get upset, like Sabrina said, I give you permission to excuse yourself, and I can't hold it against you. I'm not going to be offended that you got up and excused yourself. You got to set those expectations when you're at a high in the relationship. So that way, when you have those lows, you kind of know the avenue to expect on how you're going to handle it.
And to know it's never 100%. I think that's the big thing too, is giving yourself grace, because it doesn't always work. It doesn't. I mean, we're human. It's just part of it. Things, are going to trigger an emotional response sometimes more than what you would like it to, or more than what I would like it to. So it's never 100%. It's just to have that opportunity to put those things in place. So when you're at a level where you can at least kind of keep yourself in check and those emotions, that you have the ability to communicate in a healthy, constructive way.
Well, and I think it's always important to not always feel like you have to be right. And I have to prove to you why I'm right. Yeah, sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to be right and quiet. So what I want to talk about just before we have to get off here is how y'all deal with and how you kind of instruct families to deal with those tough calls, those hard calls to deal with. You come home and you wear those calls for months. I mean, we're doing better in South Carolina than we've ever done, but people are still trying to process and trying to deal with these calls on their own, and excluding family. I'm gonna deal with this. I'll deal with this with my guys at work, and they forget about how important it is to deal with it at home too. So, what are some strategies and tactics y'all have to deal with it? First, handle the initial, and then you deal with it as y'all move along.
That is a huge question. That is a huge question.
We could do a whole episode on that.
I feel like, at least in Oklahoma City, where having that spouse peer support program is part of that, bridging that gap of being able to acknowledge that the family is, frankly, I actually heard him say it the other night. He said, the family is the first line. That's the first line of any of that. When you come home, we get what that looks like. At work, you can carry that a lot better at work, or pretend to carry that a lot better at work, but home is safe. And so we get that at home. But one of the things that in mine that I touch on, at least in this talk real briefly, is the things to look for in the signs and symptoms of what your mind and your brain and your body and your emotions do immediately following a critical incident. So you guys are constantly on point, and your whole day is spent wondering if this next call is going to be that critical incident. So you have a little bit different perspective, in that you're constantly ramped up and here, and then when you hit that incident or that call, you get a little bit here. And so, and it's hard for that breaking point to come down. So we'd like to share with the spouses and the families of, this is what you can look for. These are things that are normal. It's normal to have nightmares. It's normal to feel anxious. It's normal to feel depressed. It's normal to kind of question things. It's normal to have a short fuse, a low frustration. It's normal for all of those things. That's just normal reaction to it. But when it becomes a problem where it goes on for 30 days or 40 days, or you start distancing yourself from your family or your friends, or you used to be a big avid hunter and now you don't want to go hunting, or, you know, you used to be pretty calm and cool and collected and now everything sets you off. Everything creates an intense reaction. And so just not being able to maintain your own level of emotional control or emotional intelligence in that. And so I feel like if we can share those things with family, then it's one, it takes the burden off of us of that it's something that we've done. Because I promise you, most wives, when you guys come home from a call or from a particularly rough shift, and you are experiencing all of those things, we think it's us. We truly do. And I laugh about it now because my husband and I have a relationship that I don't necessarily have to talk to him when he's on shift. They do 24s, and that's typically 24, 48. So when he's on shift, he's working. I don't need to talk to him unless there's just an emergency. So he would, we'd go 24 hours, not talk. And he would come in the door and maybe be a little irritated or agitated. And my immediate reaction was, what did I do? I haven't talked to him, and I thought we were fine when he left, but maybe and as a spouse, you start questioning all of those things of, well, what's wrong with our relationship? What's wrong with our marriage? So if we can provide the education for the spouses to be able to say, look, these things are normal, and these things are where we need to start really looking and going, is there potential for a problem that maybe we need to deal with? And then here's some resources in order to be able to do that. Look into your department's EAP. Oklahoma City, we have a vetted list of therapists that we can readily send anybody to that deals specifically with first responders and their families. So it's a lot to unpack, but that's the Cliff Note version.
Now, Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add, oftentimes when they come home, say from a bad call or whatever, and maybe we found out from the media, and maybe the media dramatized it way more than maybe what it actually ended up being, or maybe the media was on point with it, but we found out, not through our firefighter, but we expect our firefighter to come home immediately and tell us all about it, well, because the news did, or because so-and-so's wife husband told them, and so she called me and told me. Let your firefighter tell you when they tell you, when they're comfortable telling you. Sometimes the stories may not come out. Maybe they're not comfortable sharing it for days later, weeks later, months later. Sometimes they come out on the most inopportune time. You're trying to enjoy a day at the zoo, and they're like, oh yeah, and then I went on that call, and it's like, where did that come from? It's let them share with you when they're comfortable sharing with you. Obviously, like what Sabrina was saying, pay attention to the signs and the symptoms. Are they drinking more than they normally would? Are they drinking, earlier than what they normally would? Are they drinking isolated, alone in their room? Those types of things. Obviously, you want to keep up with the warning signs, but at the same time, be understanding that if they don't necessarily want to share with you right when they walk in the door, that's perfectly normal.
Well, I think that it's a lot easier to fool the guys on shift than it is to fool y'all.
1,000%. And that's why it's so important with what the peer support, the spouse peer support thing that's come about. And these conferences is why it's so important, because like I said, we do typically know before the station. So if we can create a support network, even if it's not at the station, some of the smaller departments or the volunteer departments may not have that spousal support in general. But if we can make the connections even across the country where another spouse can pick up the phone and say, hey, we're struggling and I don't know what to do, then, we can go, all right, well, let me see if I know somebody, one in your area where we can connect you. And if not, let's do some digging and see what we can do to help. Because I think there's it's really an exciting transition. I feel like with the fire department, and that acknowledging that there are a lot more potential issues than what we've ever really paid attention to before. And that the family is a big part in helping with that. Because if, you know, like you said, if we can have the resources for the family to be able to make a difference in their firefighter's life, that firefighter stays on the job a lot longer and is a lot healthier for it. So.
Well, so we are at our time. And I don't think I said at the beginning, but Sabrina and Amanda are at a conference right now. Y'all are in Tampa. Are you in Tampa?
Pensacola.
Pensacola.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, Amanda's poolside. She made Sabrina go inside.
It's true.
But so the association is always trying to provide something to our firefighters that makes them better. You know, and I really believe that the programs that y'all will be teaching at the beach, and I think I have your dates. It's Friday, June 16th. Sabrina, you're going to be at 10:45 to 12:15. The spouses can break for lunch. And then from 2 o'clock to 3:15, also on Friday the 16th. So what they're looking for is preventing a flashover, surviving a firefighter relationship, and back to the table, a mindset for fostering healthy relationships. So talking to the membership, take advantage of this. Bring your spouse, enjoy your time, attend the program. This will help you. If you'll see my shirt here, get better. That's part of it. It's part of it. It's everything that we do. It's all of it. And I truly agree with you that a good home life is going to make a good firefighter or a better firefighter. They'd have to be good to begin with. So if they're not good to begin with, I can't just fix it with home life. But
that's your problem, not mine.
yeah, that's on us. That's on. I'll take responsibility. But I want to thank you for getting on. I want to thank everybody who is tuned in to watch this. And I really think this is a great direction for our association on what we're providing to our membership. And I thank y'all for doing it.
Thank you so much. It was an honor and a pleasure to be a part of it, truly.
Absolutely. We look forward to seeing you on in a few weeks.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
look, be there.
Count
All right.
down.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.